We've already seen how Sony took Spider-Man out of the MCU, and are planning to put him into their own Sony Marvel Cinematic Universe, or Venomverse as I like to call it for short, which consists of the characters that came with the Spider-Man license. In other words, they'll be going head to head against the MCU, the biggest film franchise of all time bar none. On the surface, that seems insane, but there is at the very least circumstantial evidence to suggest that Marvel's Phase 4 slate isn't eliciting the same kind of excitement as earlier phases. Could the MCU have peaked? Is there a chance that now armed with Spider-Man, Sony could actually defeat Marvel at their own game and come out on top in the next few years? In this video, I'll be exploring just that, by first going through what Marvel's Phase 4 has to achieve, before exploring the potential available to Sony in the Spider-Man movie license, and what it will take to fully realize that potential. If you should like the content of this video, then leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe if you haven't, and most importantly, help share the video. That mandatory plug out of the way, let's begin. When Marvel started their own studio, they didn't have their own heavy hitters like Spider-Man, the X-Men, or Fantastic Four. They did, however, have the core roster of the Avengers, and while those characters at the time ranged from B-listers to complete unknowns from the audience's point of view, Marvel made them A-listers by putting them front and center in extremely well-crafted and well-liked movies. By the end of Phase 3, however, both Iron Man and Black Widow are dead, Captain America is a retired senior citizen, Thor is obese, depressed and has given up his throne, while Hulk is crippled. Oh, spoiler alert, I guess. So that's pretty much the end of Marvel's A-team. The question for Marvel right now is whether or not they can do what they did before again. That is, turn what from the general audience's point of view are a bunch of B-listers and unknowns, and turn them into a new batch of A-listers. They kind of have to, because Spider-Man is now gone. Daredevil and the Punisher will be out of commission for years, and Deadpool, the X-Men and Fantastic Four are probably years away as well. What Marvel has to offer on the big screen for the next couple of years is a Black Widow prequel, a movie which by rights should have come out years ago and is unlikely to push Black Widow's story forward in a meaningful way, seeing as, she's dead. A team of newcomers in the Eternals, another newcomer in the shape of Shang-Chi, before Doctor Strange returns, and Thor is replaced by Natalie Portman as female Thor. On TV, we recently learned that She-Hulk will be joining the fray, probably to replace the real but now crippled Hulk. Moon Knight is coming, and that would have been great on Netflix, but on the family-friendly Disney+, who can say? Miss Marvel will no doubt score woke brownie points, while the story of the core Avengers will be continued by no one's favorites: Hawkeye, Wanda, the Vision, and the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Then of course there is Loki and What If, but both of those take place in other timelines, so far as we can tell. If Marvel Studios has shown anything the past decade, it is never bet against them. If anyone can turn a collection of B-listers, like most of Phase 4 is made up of, and turn them into A-listers, it's Marvel. For all we know, in a couple of years from now, the Eternals could be as big as Guardians of the Galaxy, Shang-Chi could be as big as Iron Man, She-Hulk could be as big as the Hulk, and Miss Marvel could have won over the hearts and minds of fans everywhere, just like Captain Marvel. We could be looking at Marvel's new A-listers here, or we could be looking at the holdovers until Marvel gets their finger out and brings back some more recognizable characters, like the X-Men, like the Fantastic Four, and like Deadpool. Because if Marvel's Phase 4 doesn't work out as well for Marvel as they no doubt hope it does, it could potentially work out really well for Sony. The moment Venom was a hit at the box office, Spider-Man's future presence in the MCU was under threat. When Into Spider-Verse won the Oscar for Best Animated Feature, Spider-Man's remaining days in the MCU were all but numbered. Sony would take him back and put him into the Venomverse they had established, filled with confidence that this will work. For they are about to create their own Sony Marvel Cinematic Universe, which they hope the general audience won't be able to tell from the real thing. So moviegoers go see Sony's movies too, out of sheer yet misguided commitment to the MCU. That, at least, is Sony's plan. Can it work? There's two facets to that. One is theory, the other is practice. Let's begin with theory. Out of all the announced, not rumored, but announced as coming Marvel-themed movies, do you know which one I'm the most excited for? I'm almost afraid to admit it, but at this point in time, it's Venom 2 featuring Woody Harrelson's Carnage. However much a Lovecraftian title like Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness may be tantalizing, that's literally all we know about it, while we know Venom 2 has, Venom and Carnage. It may even feature Spider-Man now, although I sincerely hope not. I don't want him shoehorned in just because Sony now can. With the Spider-Man license, Sony has access to a total of 900 or so Marvel characters. Now granted, about 850 of them are total crap no one has heard of or could care less about. But even with the 50 or so worthwhile ones, they have the resources to make a very worthwhile cinematic universe of their own. One which, on paper at least, could be more appealing to fans of the Spider-Man comics than anything currently going on in the MCU. Personally, I'd be all over the entire Goblin saga retold on film, from Norman Osborn's original Green Goblin to Roderick Kingsley's Hobgoblin, with the framing of Ned Leeds along the way, before culminating with Dark Reign. They could do the Scorpion saga with the fall and redemption of J. Jonah Jameson, and they could even do the Jackal saga with Solo standing in for the Punisher. And by Solo, I don't mean Han, but the teleporting ginger executioner, who they could even spin off into a separate franchise, while the mainline movies start bringing in the Spidey clones, some of which were pretty cool, although the clone saga as a whole was not. And that's just a couple of the ones I wouldn't mind seeing. They could play around with genres and make a Sin Eater movie that could easily rival what Warner appears to be doing with the upcoming Joker. And that's just off the top of my head. If you've read some Spider-Man comics, you can easily come up with other storylines and characters that you would like to see, and Sony could do it all. Because the point I'm trying to make here is that the characters and storylines included with the Spider-Man license could easily make up a cinematic universe all of its own. One which could rival Marvel proper, provided the execution is right, because it's all in the execution. There is potential in almost everything, but potential doesn't help if you don't have either the vision, the means, or the audience support to realize that potential. There are countless examples of this in Hollywood, and we don't have to look any further than Sony to find them aplenty. They had elaborate plans for a Ghostbusters cinematic universe, which are all built around Paul Feig's female-centric remake. So needless to say, that all evaporated when that movie bombed. More relevant though, they already had the plans for and every intention to make a Spider-Man cinematic universe before. That also failed, because it was to be spun off from The Amazing Spider-Man 2, which while it did okay at the box office, fared little better than Paul Feig's Ghostbusters with critics and audiences. As I said, all the potential in the world doesn't help if you don't have the vision, means, or public support. And the first time they tried making a Spider-Man cinematic universe, the vision came from the Dream Team consisting of Amy Pascal, Avi Arad, Matt Tolmach, and Alex Kurtzman. The public didn't support the sample they got of this Dream Team's vision, as such they weren't allocated the means to continue, and Spider-Man went into the MCU. But now, Spider-Man is back at Sony, and under the control of a new Dream Team, which consists of Tom Rothman, Amy Pascal, and depending on the language of their contracts, Avi Arad and Matt Tolmach. The very people Marvel wanted locked up in a closet or otherwise kept away from proceedings during the making of Spider-Man Homecoming and Spider-Man Far From Home. Can this new Dream Team succeed where the previous iteration of it failed and beat Marvel at their own game in Phase 4? I have some thoughts on the matter. If Tom Rothman and Amy Pascal have proved one thing over the course of their careers, it is that where genre movies in general, and comic book movies in particular, are concerned, they are so far out of their respective fields of expertise it isn't even funny. Amy Pascal has never made a good comic book movie that didn't involve Kevin Feige, and Tom Rothman has never made a good comic book movie even if it did involve Kevin Feige. If they are creatively in charge, the Venomverse will go down the drain fast, with or without Spider-Man. I think the only way it can work is if they create a separate Venomverse/Spider-Man division within Sony, and have someone else run it. Who that should be, I don't know. But after Into Spider-Verse nabbed an Oscar, I wouldn't be surprised if Phil Lord and Chris Miller were on top of their wish list. Those guys might even want to stick it to Disney, seeing as they were fired from Solo. Not the Ginger Punisher ripoff, but the Han Solo ripoff. But whether it ends up them or someone else, Spider-Man can't be under the creative control of either Tom Rothman, Amy Pascal, Avi Arad, or Matt Tolmach. Let them all take credit and bask in the glory if that makes them happy, but if they actually run it, I think Spider-Man will be back in the same bad place he was following The Amazing Spider-Man 2 before long, because Sony begins their Spider-Man venture with something of an uphill struggle. They may be able to force Tom Holland into doing another movie for them, and it will be in his best interest to renew his contract with them beyond even that. However, that's all Sony might have. From what I have been told of the situation, all the other supporting characters that appeared in those movies were made into new characters, as they would be frozen following a hypothetical breakup between Sony and Marvel. That's why Peter's love interest, MJ, wasn't Mary Jane Watson, but Michelle Jones, a new character combining the features of Mary Jane Watson and Michelle Gonzalez of the comics. Likewise, Ned Leeds in the movie was really Ganke Lee of the comics under another name. But by doing it that way, Sony can keep using Mary Jane, Michelle Gonzalez, Ganke Lee, and even the original Ned Leeds in their future movies. To be clear, I haven't seen any contracts confirming it, but I have been told the characters created for the MCU can't join Spider-Man out of it. What is definitely out are all the various Spider-Man outfits seen in the MCU, as well as any explicit references to Tony Stark or anyone or anything else associated with the MCU. So even if Sony plan on continuing the story set up at the end of Far From Home, they're going to have to soft reboot it, one way or the other. It will be interesting to see how they do that, and it's going to take quite the filmmaker to pull it off. And if they succeed with that, then what? Sony reportedly has planned the next 7 years worth of Spider-Man themed movies. Some of those are known, most aren't. The movies currently in production though are all recycled from Sony's original Dream Team's plans for a Sony Cinematic Universe, and we know which movies those were. In the next video, we'll go over those defunct plans and see which ones Sony's current Dream Team might want to resurrect for their upcoming slate. Till then, be sure to let me know whether or not you think Sony can outdo Marvel in Phase 4, and your hopes for Spider-Man under Sony's rule in the comments.